All right, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are around the world. Welcome back to Creation Conversations. And we are joined today with a very good friend of mine who I've known for several years now. Another Joe, in fact. It's Joe Taylor. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Good, good. So, where in the world do you come from, Joe?
I come from right here in Mount Blanco community. Actually, I live in Crosbyton next to the Blanco Canyon, which is full of giant crocodiles, mammoth, mastodon, fossil horses, fossil bison, and people up at the very top layer, dinosaur tracks down to the limestone,
Mhm.
and a lot of stuff in between.
And that's in Texas, in the
That-
USA, yes?
That's in Texas, not far from Lubbock, Texas,
Uh-huh.
known most famously for Buddy Holly the musician.
Oh yes, yeah. I remember because I visited you what was it, over a year ago now. It was January 2020, before all of the pandemic and before all of the lockdown and everything. We spent a couple of months together. But I think the first time that I met you was actually during this. Let me put a photo up here. This is you can see yourself there on the right hand side, and on the left there's Gary there, who is one of our helpers at Jurassic Ark in Australia, which is when I first actually met you.
Yes, and that's my favorite fossil animal. There's three of them. The
Uh-huh.
Metaphasor, the giant salamander, which you have there, that was a cow find. I found it at a cow trail and put it back together. The mammoth and the bison. Those are my three favorite things. We have a lot of them around here, but that's one of my best specimens. And I'm glad it's in Australia to show people over there the fantastic works of God. You know, the complexity of these things. They're not simple at all, like we've been told.
Mhm.
They're really complex. They shed their teeth, grow new ones. The teeth are complex. Their skulls are complex. They have a third eye that goes into the brain. So anyway, it's a wonderful specimen. I'm glad you guys got it.
Yeah, they are really wonderful, wonderful fossils, and that was when I first met you because it actually turned out to be cheaper to bring you along with the fossil than just to bring the fossil itself to
Right. And had
Australia.
it been,
So
if it were damaged or anything, I could have fixed it. So I
exactly,
came prepared
exactly.
to do that.
Yeah,
But we
so
got we got to
it
see
was a good.
kangaroos.
Yeah, you got to see kangaroos because I was sort of your chauffeur for a little while when we were
Yeah,
in
you were.
Australia. We were traveling around with John Mackay and doing some bits. So we had an Englishman, an American, and an Australian all together for a while. But let's talk a little bit more about the Metaphasor, because there you see on the left hand side there is the skull itself. On the right hand side is actually a graphic that we got one of our graphic people to do at Creation Research to sort of give people an idea as to how big these things are, because they really are quite long. You know, they're 3 meters. They're sort of pretty sizable creatures. But you can see here the little caption. They've got many mass graves known, and of course I know you. I mean, you excavated this thing, didn't you, Joe? So, can you sort of talk about the mass mortality of these creatures that you and how you find them?
When I was in high school, there was a photograph in our, I don't know which book it was, some history book or something, and it showed a mass mortality site of these same Metaphasors from
Mm,
New Mexico. And there were all these skulls about this size, 17, 18 inches long, all sort of pointing at each other. And that entire animal was there. A couple were turned upside down. And that's just what they used to show us, that this lake dried up. These animals all died there, stuck together. They don't explain what put the 200 feet of clay and rock and sandstone over the top of them. They never
yeah.
explained that. Well, when I started collecting in Blanco Canyon down here in 1984, when I moved back to Texas from California, I began to find parts of these. I've found parts of hundreds of them. I've excavated several skulls. Most of them are 50% or so, because I usually find them in cow trails or eroding out of the edge of a
Mhm.
cliff. But they're always broken up because of ground shifting and all that. And I know now from studying these things, I've talked to several, I know some of the top experts in the world on Triassic material. These are supposed to be around 180 to 200 million years old,
Yeah.
of course, of which I do not at all agree with. But I know there are big, huge deposits of those here in New Mexico and Arizona. There's also deposits in Germany and in Russia.
Mhm.
I'm not sure about the rest of those parts of the world, but India has a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, they're all the same basic animals. Occasionally, you'll have one animal that occurs in a fauna that it's not in maybe Texas or in England or Germany somewhere. But they're these massive creatures. They're all swamp creatures. They apparently, we don't know what they ate, each other in some cases, or roots or plants. But they have a lot of teeth, a couple of hundred teeth. They have a marvelous little brain. You know, people talk about big brains are so important. Well, you know, if you look at the brain of a mosquito, they control in the entire country of Sweden, I'm told, and Texas.
Yeah.
And little mosquitoes have no brain at all. Well, these Metaphasors have a brain about the size of your thumbnail.
Okay,
your thumb.
so pretty
small. But
small.
according to, if evolution were true, they were a wonderful specimen because they lasted for tens of millions of years.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look like they're so inferior. When these evolutionists say that man has been around as we know them for the last 3 million or something, well, that's nothing compared to 80 or 200 million, you know, or 20 million, whatever. So the whole thing's kind of silly to say that we're superior to that when we haven't been here but a few thousand years, of course. So,
and it's interesting as well looking at the Metaphasor, because it is basically just a giant salamander. It's a great big amphibian, and I recently had a debate online, which you may have heard of. I'll just put the picture up here with Standing for Truth, who we've been on several times, and it was against myself and a atheist and Bible critic, Taylor Gray. You can actually go back and watch the debate. It's a fascinating debate and a clash of views. It's had nearly 1.6 thousand views at the moment. But one of the points that I try to make over and over again is defining what evolution was and defining what evolution means, and sort of matching it up to the fossil record. And I made the point that you only find one of 3 things in the fossil record. You either find that creatures have remained exactly the same, they're living fossils, a term coined by Charles Darwin, or you find in the case of the Metaphasor, they have changed, but it's not evolution. You see, they used to be great big creatures. They used to be wonderful, great big, 3 meters long, huge giant salamander. Today, the majority of salamanders are piddly little things in comparison. And even the Chinese giant salamander only gets to around 6 feet in length. It's nothing compared to the great big Metaphasor. So there's definitely been change, but it's not evolution because it's going the wrong way. Evolution says you start down here and build yourself up, and the reality is see is creatures either remain the same, creatures either go downhill, they devolve, or they go extinct. And the point that I made to Taylor and during the debate, and the point we make lots and lots of times, is not 3 of those things are any help to evolution in the slightest. Because if you want to turn a single-celled organism or single-celled creature into something beautifully and complex like a Metaphasor, then you need to add an incredible amount of information. It's a very steep uphill climb, and we really just don't see that in the fossil record at all.
Well, if I'm not so sure. I frankly haven't studied modern salamanders. We used to play with them when I was a kid, but none of ours had teeth. The hellbenders that we find around here, they may be 12 inches long. I don't think they have teeth, and I'm not sure about the ones in China that gets to be 6 feet long.
Yeah.
But even if they were the same animal, evolution that I was taught was everything was simple and got bigger and bigger and more complex. Well, if you look at a modern salamander, boy, they're not complex at all compared to these Metaphasors. So that in itself, the giantism, the reverse giantism, or lack of giantism now, says that that's just not true. What we've been taught about evolutionism, and so why aren't there huge swamps all over Texas? Almost a third of the United States would have been swamps. Germany, Russia, other places like that, India. Why aren't there these giant swamps now with these huge creatures in there? If things have remained the same and they just gotten a little change from here to there, there's no reason for those animals to go extinct according to evolutionism, because they're superior beings if you look at their what we know about them. But if the world has been getting drier and colder since Noah's flood, that would, to me, explain a good deal of that. There just isn't as much. The atmosphere is not as conducive to giantism now as it was, in my opinion.
Not at all. I mean, if you look at some of the modern day salamanders, because I've worked briefly with salamanders when I was working in the zookeeping industry. Okay. A lot of them do have teeth. A lot of the smaller ones have what we would call
bony ridges.
Well, the little ones, by the time they get down to the little tiny ones, they would be probably no more than ridges, but certainly the giant salamander. I just want to see very, very quickly if I can pull up a photo out of my archive. If you just bear with me
I
one
need to
second.
study. I need to study these modern ones a little better since I'm so involved in the
Let's
fossil ones.
see
I
if
need to
I
know more
can.
about the
Let's
modern
see if I can
ones.
just pull this one up very quickly. If it will go, there we go. Yeah, because they just basically are a smaller version of the Metaphasor. There we go. There's the that's the Chinese giant salamander one. It's not a great quality picture, but you can see the little teeth
Yeah, it's got the teeth.
running through there. It's definitely got the teeth, and it's got the same eye socket and nose socket and everything all sort of in place. That's obviously a side view. It's not ideal because you could do with the top view as well. But as from my opinion, really having sort of seen both of them in the hand, if you like. They are just a devolved. There's been definite changes, and there's been definite, there's been bone structure changes and the like, but it's definitely diversification within a kind as opposed to a completely new kind. It fits exactly with what we see in Scripture, which when God says He created all things to reproduce after their own kind. So that was the Metaphasor. That's when I first sort of met you, and started to learn a little bit about you and the casting and the dinosaur digs and things like that you do. So you've sent a few photos here for us to look at. Let me just put this up because I think this is associated with some exciting new research which you're involved in. This sort of bit of bone there. What's going on here, Joe?
That's a piece of bone from the Triassic beds out here with the giant salamanders, giant crocodilians, the phytosaurs are, the Postosuchus and all that. Dinosaurs, and I'm not sure. I didn't examine that bone really. They just need Dr. Armitage need a sample of Triassic bone to see if he could find any soft material in it. So I sent him that. That's a good chunk of bone, about half the size of your hand. So he's got a new lab, new microscope set up down at Carl Ball's Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas, about a month or so ago. So he's going to be taking some of these bones and other bones that we've collected for him, and more we're going to collect here in a few weeks, to see if there's still viable material in there, at least soft material. And that's what he's been finding. In fact, he just published, I believe, Microscopy Today, published his finding of nerves in a Triassic horn. A Triceratops horn from the Cretaceous, so-called. And in there was not only the nerve, but the double helix wrapping around it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really very exciting stuff. To say that's 65 million years old, when you're finding that with the research we can do now, I think it's just kind of ludicrous to maintain that this stuff is millions of years old.
I think one of our research scientists that are involved with creation research is, and I forget his name straight away, but it'll come to me in a second. But he works basically for a living. He pulls together organic molecules and organic materials. He's a university professor in Canada, and I remember very clearly one of the quotes where he was talking about, because you see, when a lot of people, paleontologists like you and us, we deal with dead things. We dig up the dead bones, we look at the dead bones and fix them back together and stuff. And so when you come across soft tissue and sort of organic components, it's often worthwhile speaking to the organic chemists themselves and actually getting an opinion from them about it. Because when you had soft tissue first found, almost straight away it was, well, wow, this soft tissue can last for 65 million years or however long. That was just the automatic assumption that once they'd recognized, they were against finding it in the first place, but once they'd recognized it, it was like, it's great, it can last if it's preserved well enough. If you speak to the organic chemists who actually know what they're talking about when it comes to organic chemistry and these soft, squidgy stuff, I remember this one professor said it's akin to finding fresh milk that has been sitting out in the sun for 40 years. It just doesn't happen. There's no way that you can have it, even with the best preservation in the world. And not only is it have to be a very would you say that they've show evidence of being catastrophically buried very quickly?
All the Triassic stuff does. The Cretaceous, well, this is actually a Morrison Formation. Jurassic Formation, where we took the vertebra out of last summer, so that he can see what's in there. That's a mass mortality site. In that one area that we've taken out maybe 20 or 30 feet by 10 feet deep of rock.
Yeah.
And in there, parts of 12 different animals. There are several sauropods, about 3 allosaurs. There's one ankylosaur, an armored dinosaur upside down, of course. There's a baby Camarasaurus in there, about probably 2 feet tall, and crocodiles, other animals like that. And that's just true of that entire area out there. That goes for 40 miles every direction that I'm aware of, and further, maybe 100 miles every direction. There are millions and millions and millions of dinosaurs buried there. So to say that they all were crossing a creek one day and got drowned in 2 feet of water, that's what you'd have to believe in order to believe their scenario. Over at the Dinosaur National Monument in Vernal, Utah, which is the same material we're collecting in Colorado, same layers, it's just it's tilted up on a different angle over there. There are, I don't know how many animals they've taken out of there. They're just stacked on top of each other. One of them still had its skin intact, one of the sauropods.
Just remarkable preservation.
Yeah, with a rosette pattern. Yeah, we know what it looked like. The bone. Well, there's a sort of an osseo material in the skin. It's not quite bone, but it's like bone, but it preserves.
Mm-hmm.
And they're arranged in daisy patterns. You know, like they show in some of the ancient artwork from Peru. There's a daisy pattern in there of bones, which are in the skin, which is over the bones of the body.
Mm-hmm.
Again, so complex, so big, with more bones than we've got by quite a number.
Yeah. So while we're on dinosaurs, let's talk about dinosaurs for a little bit, because you see, I've just come back from a dinosaur, the dinosaur island, as it is now known, the Isle of Wight, which is on the south coast of the UK, is the 6th best place in the world for diversity of dinosaurs. It's really where the dinosaur frenzy sort of started, long before you had the big exhibitions in the USA.
Right.
It was well known. The Reverend William Fox lived there. William Buckland, very famous names, would come down, and the founder of the Natural History Museum as well, Richard Owen. They all spent time digging down there, searching for the great dinosaurs of old. Things like these are some of the footprints that I took just last week. This is at Brook Bay on the Isle of Wight. Some wonderful dinosaur footprint casts, natural casts, where the dinosaur has walked on the sort of soft clay at the bottom, and it's been filled up with this sort of sandstone and eroded away these beautiful foot casts. And also I found this as well, this beautiful little, it's certainly a vertebrae, a tail vertebrae, a caudal vertebrae, probably from an iguanodon, which was one of the first named dinosaurs first discovered dinosaurs in the world, discovered in the UK, and this was found just rolled out on the foreshore. So we get quite a few dinosaurs here in the UK as well, but unfortunately nothing quite as impressive in our collection than this, Joe. This is one of your digs. Tell us about this.
That's at the LC2 quarry with Dr. Carl Baum on the right. My friend, the late Don Yeager, was my main digging partner. We dug everywhere. Then the late Kurt Lacoste, whose family owned the ranch. Then one of his sons, who was not around when we started that dig. What we're holding up there are casts that I made from the bones we excavated right there of this big Camarasaurus that was laying upside down on its back with its legs sort of bent up in the air, if you're, kind of like a baby does. So I molded those, made a cast. We brought them back out to the very site they came from, and put them up on this bucket, which represents about the amount of foot bones that were missing, which are another jacket. So that's how big that animal was. He's not even a really old animal. He's none of them. There are animals that got bigger than that, but that's about an average size of one of those sauropods out there. We know now that their legs pretty much came down straight under the bodies like an elephant or a cow, not at an angle, like they were. Sometimes they try to depict them that way, but this thing was tall, and his backbone, of course, goes up higher than the hip sockets there. Then his neck goes up probably another 10 or 12 feet. This was a large animal, and they were everywhere. There were
Yeah.
millions of these things, and they all got buried at one time. The rock there is a light gray, which when we're had to use jackhammers a lot of times to excavate them, and but when it gets wet, sometimes turns to like a mushy clay, like Jello.
Mm.
And if the bones are in that, you got to leave them alone, because if you disturb them, they'll be like an oatmeal cookie. They'll just dissolve and fall apart. So we got to be very careful. But when we take these things out, I leave about 6 inches of rock around the bone, because if you try to get too close to the bone, the rock will pull the bone apart. Then you've got to put it back together.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Nice
but
and careful, slow and steady.
slow
It's
and steady.
it's interestingly just the way you describe the dinosaur and how you find it, because a point that I like to remind people is when you go into the museums and you see the wonderful dinosaur sort of in a nice sort of standing pose for you, that's not how you find them in the rocks at all. And I know you know this for sure. But a lot of them are found. In fact, the vast majority of them are found in this sort of strange position that you talk about, with the head bent back and the mouth open and the tail bent up and the legs sort of sprawled out in sort of like you said, the baby position. And is the general consensus amongst most paleontologists now is that these dinosaurs drowned. There's no other real explanation for being able to get into that position. And what's more, if you drown in that position, you have to actually be buried within 3 to 4 minutes. Otherwise, your muscles begin to relax and you don't stay in that position anymore. And then after about 30 minutes, rigor mortis sets in. So if you want to bury these creatures in this position, not only do you have to drown them, you then have to actually bury them and preserve them and trap them in sediment within minutes. And I mean, how many are there in this deposit? Hundreds of thousands, millions of these things?
There are millions in that like I say, that strata. We're just in one layer. There's layers there about 200 feet thick that we can see, and we've traced the bones down the sides of the mountain there. There's also the odd thing about the ankylosaurs, the armored dinosaurs that have the shell on the outside and the other skeleton underneath. That's complexity for you, you know.
Yeah.
Almost all the ankylosaurs in North America are buried upside down. Why is that? Because they're buried in liquid mud. They drown and turn upside down because they're in liquid mud. And that mud these things are buried in had to be pretty thick and viscous. Otherwise, as you say, in a few days they would start to fall apart. The muscles relax, and they would their jaws would come open. But a lot of times, these dinosaurs are found with their mouths shut or slightly open, which means if they would have died in the forest that they say live in the tropical forest in a hot, tepid environment, it wouldn't be very long and those jaws would fall apart. They'd be scattered and stepped on, all that. The teeth would fall out of the sockets. It's like the allosaur we excavated about 5 miles away. The jaws were still in place. The teeth were all still in its sockets. And the head was connected to the neck. But as you mentioned, it was in a recurved position going back. So why would all the ankylosaurs be upside down in North America as opposed to the Gobi Desert in China? They're almost all on their stomachs. I talked to Dr. Mark Norell, who was one of the main paleontologists of recent years over there in the China Gobi Desert. And I asked him, I said, are most of the dinosaurs and the ankylosaurs in China, the Gobi Desert, are they on their stomach or are they otherwise? He's, well, yeah, most of them, some are messed up, but most of them are on their stomachs. Well, now, why would they in China, why would they be on their stomachs? Well, Amy Davidson, who was one of the excavators there, was fairly famous for a while for her oviraptor sitting on its nest. She excavated that and showed me the actual jacket that she was working on. And she said it's like a load of sand was dumped on the whole place. Well, maybe that happened, but that wouldn't happen today. You might get a dust storm to put in a foot or so of sand, but to have a load of sand dumped on the whole thing. So with these ankylosaurs, it wasn't apparently liquid mud that buried the Gobi. It was some sort of volcanic fallout or sand fallout. I don't know what. But the dinosaurs, the ankylosaurs are on the stomachs there. They're upside down over here in liquid mud. So
Definitely
again,
something major and definitely something catastrophic. Absolutely. Catastrophic. Yeah. I was just having a look over the chat. It's sort of blowing up, but the discussion mostly seems to be over monarch butterflies, which is great. Carry on with your discussion. A reminder to people that we have our own creation Q&A site answered by experts from around the world. You can go to askjohnmackay.com, or if you go to creationresearch.net, and you can find links to the Q&A site there if you want to find out more about the work that we do, and also questions and answers there as well. We've got only about 4 or 5 minutes left, Joe, so let's finish off by one other discussion here, because like I mentioned earlier, I spent it was a good couple of months with you in Texas last January and February. Here's some of the stuff that we got up to, putting back together this mammoth skeleton here. Oh, sorry, it's not a mammoth, is it? It's a mastodon. That's right. I've got to get it
mastodon.
right. That's right. Yeah, absolutely
With
wonderful.
the cowboy in front of it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was great to spend some time with you and learn, because you really are sort of world expert when it comes to doing these casts, doing the molds, digging and excavating stuff. So it was great to spend some time with you. And this is something that we actually picked up, not for you to sort of restore and put back together again. This beautiful, and I've never seen one like this before, a blue mastodon.
Right. Yeah, that's when we opened the box there at that place and looked inside,
it was just glorious, wasn't it?
It was blue. It was blue. Yeah. Oh, that is beautiful. It's gotten blacker, like most of those bones. As they dry out, they get blacker. Yeah, but there's still the blue. Petite, you can still see the blue in there.
It's just beautiful, isn't it?
Beautiful stuff. Yeah, beautiful stuff.
And of course, you've worked on stuff all around the world, including this site. This was in the front of your museum that we sort of spent a couple of months living at and doing some work in. So just tell us briefly what's going on here, because this is quite a famous site, I believe.
That's a cast from the Waco sudden death mammoth site that was made on a national park by Mr. Obama back in 2015, I believe. There are 21 mammoths buried there. About 12 of the half of them are mothers who apparently were holding their babies up on their tusk. Then there was this what you see here is a full-size female that we thought was a juvenile until we excavated and found out the bones have been picked up and shifted back on each other, shortening her torso quite a bit. But she had no tusk. It looks like a juvenile, but she had adult teeth. But her baby was only about as big as a collie dog, and it perished in front of her. The rest of the mammoths, including the herd bull, were holding up either their own babies or one of the juveniles, like the herd bull was. He perished holding this baby up on his tusk because he got his left leg caught under his body and he just drowned in the liquid mud, along with all these other mammoths, this giant camel. There's a horse nearby, and we don't know what all else, but I think they quit at number 21. They built a big visitor center over it. And I told them this probably has to do with the crucifixion of Christ. The rocks rending around the world. It is not 64,000 years old. It is a one single event. It's not over a period of time these dumb mammoths fell into a peat bog or something. Yeah. It's a single event.
It's another major catastrophic event that sort of buried these all together. Yeah. All right. Well, that just about brings us to the end. Thank you very much for coming on, Joe. You must come on again. But before we leave, just remind everybody as to how they can find out more about your work and how they can find out more about the museum. And I'll just put the website up there for you as well.
All right. Our website is, of course, www.mountblanco.com. That looks like Mont Blanco, but we're Texans, so we say Mount Blanco, MTBLANCO, Blanco, Mount Blanco 1. MountBlanco.com. And a lot of the stuff we have is listed for sale. My book on giants is there, but many other things we don't have up yet. Hopefully we'll get there. But we're in Texas, in Crosbyton, east of Lubbock, Buddy Hollyville, and about 3 miles from all the fossil beds of Blanco Canyon, where we went looking.
We did go. You took me there. It was a wonderful drive through the mountains there and exploring, and a big long road trip all the way across the other side of the of the country to Arizona as well. So we had a great time, and I look forward to when I can come back and spend some more time with you. But that is our time up. Thank you very much, folks, for joining in. Thank you very much for all of the chat as well. There's been some great discussion going on there, but do join us next time for Creation Conversations. We'll have another guest on, whether it'll be John Mackay or somebody else. I know about as much as you do at the moment, so goodbye, God bless. Joe, thank you very, very much for coming and having this chat with us, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
My pleasure.